My name is Becky King. I am a critical care nurse at Air Care, and I'm also the clinical education coordinator. Today is our quarterly airway lab. Our crews come in and they train on one of our most frequent, it's a low frequency, but it has a very high risk procedure, so our airway lab. So us maintaining the care we need for our patients and providing the things. So this is when we train to do that, and we train for different situations. My role is, as the clinical education coordinator, is I help coordinate the dates for this, as well as I participate in instruction. So today I was in the sim lab, in the control room, monitoring, watching as there's changes in the patient. I'm watching the crews to see how they react, what type of care they provide, and interventions.
So today I'm working with the education team to do our quarterly airway review. So we have our teams come in and they work on a patient with a high fidelity simulation. So this mannequin actually can shake like they're seizing, they can have problems with their airway anatomy, they can blink, it looks like they're breathing. Very, very high fidelity device. And what we're doing is trying to make a real world scenario come alive in the lab so that we know that we're always on the cutting edge and that our providers are always squared away for things that they may not have seen in a couple of weeks or a month. So we're always pushing and driving to try to get better, and that's what the lab is all about. So my role is actually to be a confounding part of the scenario. Oftentimes we go out to outside facilities, and because we don't work with them normally, they're going to do things differently than we do. Working in the mode where we have physicians on scene, we have to be able to mesh up with their teams, but also drive what UNC would want us to do, because we're trying to bring UNC level care to patients at every facility that we go to. And you won't always find the same abilities, just because we're a pediatric specialty center. The folks that we go out to see may not deal with pediatrics very often. So we try to bring our expertise to them and try to work sort of in mesh and work together. So today we're basically trying to show what it might be like at an outside spot.
And so what we're doing today is using our high fidelity sim lab to basically train people in emergency intubation, rapid sequence intubation, basically taking control of the airway of patients that are in demise. So we basically use that and we bring them in and put them through different scenarios that are high stress that maybe we don't see every day. And so they practice the skills that are important, that they don't get to use every day. They practice them in the sim lab so that when they're called upon to do that, they're able to do it effectively. So the sim lab for UNC Carolina Air Care has only been open now for about 6 months. Before that, we were using other places. We worked well with the UNC School of Medicine and other simulation labs that UNC has, and we would basically go there and do our simulations there. But now we have our own simulation lab that we use, and so we've been doing it here in our own lab for about 6 months. So UNC Carolina Air Care has seen unprecedented growth. In the last year or so, we had 2 helicopters and a few ground units, and now we have 4 helicopters and a fixed wing program and more ground bases. So we've had a lot of growth, and with that we've had a lot more employees, and so the requirement for training a larger number of people required us to have our own dedicated space and our own dedicated simulation lab, which has been phenomenal as far as keeping all of our people up to date and trained on new procedures, as well as practicing the ones that they've been doing for a long time. So UNC Carolina Air Care is used in a couple of different ways. Interfacility transports, where we go out to rural hospitals where patients are there that need tertiary care. We go out and we transport them back to a tertiary care center, such as UNC. And then we are called upon by EMS agencies and fire departments to respond to scenes. And when we respond to scenes, we actually go to the scenes of accidents. Sometimes we go to if there's a stroke patient or a STEMI patient out in a rural area that needs to get to a cath lab or a stroke center very quickly, then we're called to those scenes as well. So, you know, in any given day, our staff can be in a helicopter, an airplane, and a ground ambulance all in one shift. So when you go on a rotor wing shift, the shift generally starts with the checking of equipment. The crews have a brief where the offgoing crew briefs the oncoming crew of, you know, any departmental changes or policy issues or equipment issues or anything like that. So there's a brief that happens then. Then the crews will go out, they'll check all the equipment, they'll go through the aircraft, and then they do, all of the crews across the state actually log into like a video web conference, and we do what we call a departmental safety brief for all the crews. And then once that happens, they pretty much go into waiting for the mission. And so they wait for calls for service, and while they're doing that, they may be doing paperwork, they may be doing some online training, because the training doesn't stop here in the sim lab. You'll see them doing a lot of like online stuff, and then a lot of times they do little mini simulations there at the base, preparing for what might happen. And they pretty much wait for a call, and then once they get a call, the pilot will check the weather and make sure that it's safe for the crew to go to the call. And once the pilot checks the weather, then they'll accept the mission, and when they accept the mission, the crew will go to the aircraft, and they'll start planning as soon as they walk out the door. They start thinking about what possibilities, what things they might encounter, and what their plan will be, depending on the call.
And how long have you been flying?
I have been flying since 1998.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And you're taking care of the patient in the back?
I am, with my partner. There's
Okay.
two of us in the back.
Okay. Well, can you tell us like about an everyday type of experience that you do?
Sure. Here at UNC, all programs are set up different, but here at UNC, with Carolina Air Care, we have two teams. I'm on the adult side, so it's two of us. My partner's a nurse, I'm a paramedic. We run 24-hour shifts.
So you're on the clock for 24 full hours?
Yep.
Okay.
I came in this morning, I'll go home tomorrow morning.
Got it.
Hopefully. That's the goal.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
And how many shifts a week?
Usually two.
Okay.
Two shifts a week.
Because you're going so much. Yeah, that's more than anybody's full-time.
Right.
Like at
it is,
every day of the week.
and you know, and some of us, like myself, for instance, when I'm not in the aircraft, I am shift operations coordinator for 12 hours, so that makes up my week. So my personal duty time is 24 on the ship, and then 12 in the office running coordinations.
Got it. Got it. And how many? You call them missions, right?
We do.
Okay. How many missions would you say on average you're a part of a week, or in general is UNC Air Care?
Well, it varies. It depends on a lot of weather issues and maintenance issues, but on average, with one aircraft, I would guess 20 a week, maybe.
20 a week. That's quite a bit.
And it's hit or miss. You know how EMS is.
Yes.
It's either hot or cold. You know,
Right,
one
right.
day we're nonstop, the other day we're not running at all. So.
Yeah. And what kind of notice do you have when you're on shift that you have to go out to an emergency?
It's like immediate. We'll get paged out by the pager, and we have about 5 minutes to do pre-flight and get up to the aircraft, because our aircraft at Tar Heel 1, our base at Siler City, is a few hundred feet from the helipad, so we walk up there ASAP.
So you stay right there.
At the base.
And you're on call, so the second something comes in, you're hustling that fast.
We're moving up to the aircraft, yeah.
And how do you get in because when we went up on the helicopter, it took a while to do all the checks and this and that, but you said you can knock it down in minutes?
In minutes, yes.
Yeah.
So once the pre-flight is done in the morning, every morning the crew does a pre-flight. The pilot does his pre-flight, the crew does their medical equipment check, we check off everything in our computer, make sure everything's ready to go for the day. That's our routine.
Right.
Sometimes our routine doesn't get done because we could hit the door and have a mission. We just have to make sure all of our mandatory safety stuff is done before we can leave on that mission. So the pilot has to do his safety checks, his pre-flights. He'll go over the entire aircraft before we can accept the mission.
Yeah.
Whether it comes in, when we walk in the door or not, that still has to be done.
Yeah, got it. And what about weather? Like if it's bad weather, it's raining or a storm or...
We fly under visual flight rules, VFR, and we have our minimums. So some programs are IFR instrument rated, we're not instrument rated. So we have to see where we're going and we have our minimums. You know, for instance, a cloud deck has to be 1,000 foot off the ground and we have to have a visual of at least 3 miles or we don't go.
When you say you're visual, that means you don't have, like, no one's on a radio tower assisting you. You just visually...
We do, I mean, we do talk on the radio, but it's not necessary.
Right.
I mean, as long as we can see 3 miles and we can get off the ground 1,000 feet, we can take a mission.
Yeah, because we were talking earlier about possible bird strikes.
That is possible.
And that's something you're just visually looking...
We share the same airspace, that's correct.
Yeah. And so you're just, the warning is you're looking for birds.
Yeah, and that's why 2 of us fly out up front on the leg out with no patient. That's just to help the pilot out with visual.
Wow.
You know, there are private pilots out there that sometimes aren't paying attention, so we look out for them. And we have all the instruments in the cockpit to warn us of oncoming aircraft. And,
right. And,
you know.
And that helicopter is, how much does that helicopter cost?
I didn't really see the bill, but empty without medical equipment in it, I think it's close to like 7 mil.
Wow.
Yeah, now, you know, a few mil of medical equipment on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive.
So it's like a $10 million helicopter.
Yeah, if you add it all up, yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And do you have a rough idea of how much it costs to go on one mission?
I have no clue.
You have no clue.
Nope. I know it's expensive to, you know, because each startup costs money. It uses fuel and wear and tear on the engines because we go through daily maintenance checks with the mechanics, and then we go through a weekly maintenance check. And after so many hours of use, 800 hours, it gets a complete tear down.
Okay.
You know, so it goes to the hangar. We have a hangar for this aircraft up at Burlington Airport, and it'll go in for a couple weeks and get totally torn down and inspected, you know, every so often. So that's why we have a backup.
Got it. Got it.
You know, in our fleet, we have 4 main rotor wings and 1 backup.
Okay. And you go into some pretty extreme situations, right?
Explain extreme. We can land just about anywhere, yes.
Right.
Like on scene calls.
What's one of the nuttiest places you've had to land?
Nuttiest? Hopefully we won't land in any nutty situation, but we can land in any field as long as it's big enough. Our minimum requirement is 100 foot square, which is probably about as big as a helipad.
Yeah.
And we can land in that.
So you've done
easy.
fields, you've done...
fields, roads, highways.
Highways?
Interstates is a common one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the fire department will shut the interstate down while we land and take care of the patient on a wreck.
Yeah, yeah. And then situations range anywhere from like the type of situation, why you're being called in terms of actually helping a patient. What are the range of situations that you might find?
Well, as an adult team, we handle all trauma and we handle all the adult patients. And we also have a specialty pediatric team that handles all the pediatric and all the neonate. So depending upon the call type that comes in, that's what crew goes. So our pediatric team is at a dedicated base, but if they need the helicopter, we'll come give them ours and they'll go.
Okay.
Because those guys, they know pediatrics better than we do.
But when you say trauma, like that's everything, like car crashes.
Yes, when it comes to trauma, we handle all ages.
Yeah.
Because we're the paramedic nurse crew, unlike the pediatric crew, which is a respiratory therapist and a nurse.
Yeah.
They don't have any experience in the field, but the medic on the crew has field experience with wrecks and extrications and things like that.
Right, right. Okay.
So that's our expertise, where the nurse is more the critical care, intensive care unit expertise, yeah. So we make a pretty good team.
Yeah. And what's your favorite part of the job?
Flying.
Yeah?
It's no better job in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, taking care of, making a difference in their lives.
Saving lives.
Saving lives,
yeah.
You know, and who's got an office that flies around the sky, you know?
Yeah. And you've been flying for 21 years, you said?
I have, yeah.
21 years, that's the best part. What's the worst part? I think I know.
What do you know?
Well, I would imagine like the things you have to see sometimes in trauma.
Yeah, and you know, this job's not cut out for everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. I block it out. Sometimes it'll hit me later, but when I'm doing my job, I'm concentrating.
You're able to stay focused.
I focus on my job, and then we do have programs that if it hits you later, you can de-stress
Yeah.
with experts in that field and deal with it. But
That's got to be incredibly important.
it is, and
Yeah.
they provide all the resources we need for that. You know.
Excellent.
Some people handle scenes different than other people.
Yeah, I imagine so. We had a pretty incredible day out here in Siler City and Chapel Hill, North Carolina, flying from one to the other. We started out where the Chatham Hospital is. That's one of the bases for the Carolina Air Care helicopters. These massive helicopters, well, they're actually small, but massively priced. About a $10 million helicopter going up in the air. And I was able to go up with our pilot and fly over to the UNC hospital, land on the helipad. And then he took me back up and we did a lot of deep turns in either direction, hit a few small wind pockets, felt my stomach go up and down a few times. And overall just learned a ton about these sort of life-saving operations. Getting into a helicopter, I wasn't super nervous because we'd been so focused on getting the suit on, the helmet fit, looking at all the gear we were lining up. And so by the time we got in and I had the safety check and he showed me, hey, if something happens and I become incapacitated, these are the things you have to do. And all I could think about is like, wait, what? I heard none of that. So we went over it again. We go up in the air, and next thing I know, I look out the window and we went from ground to very high up in what felt like a very short amount of time, seconds. I'm used to flying in an airplane where you're ramping up and you go up, but the helicopter's like, wah! So that was amazing and quite a surprise to me how fast the liftoff is. By the time we were actually heading over, I think we were going through just really lush, beautiful trees and areas all the way in. It was quite gorgeous, and I got some lovely shots from the top of the helicopter. I shot low because I had a nice plexiglass at my feet. I could shoot low. I got some great interiors of kind of what's going on in the helicopter, as well as him flying, and I was able to actually zip it around and get some shots of both of us together. So it was really cool. Got a lot of photographs in a relatively short amount of time.